One man who hasn't been afraid to take on Fauci's China virus theatrics is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He joins us right now. Senator Paul, thank you for being with us. You know, Senator, Tony Fauci took to the airwaves after his very embarrassing emails were released, and I think he was trying to do some damage control, but as he often does, he sounded a lot like an apologist for the Chinese Communist Party. Let's have a listen.
I mean, obviously you want openness and cooperation. One of the ways you can get it is don't be accusatory. The idea, I think, is quite far-fetched that the Chinese deliberately engineered something so that they could kill themselves as well as other people. It's obviously in China's interest to find out exactly what it is. And the is of the natural theory would be to find that link. So you have to keep looking for it.
So, Senator Paul, it seems as though Tony Fauci almost reflexively takes a defensive posture whenever it comes to the Chinese, even trying to get us to believe that it's somehow in the CCP's interest to be forthcoming. Your thoughts about his posturing?
You know, I think it's a rather naive notion by Dr. Fauci to think that we can still trust the Chinese. He was asked in a committee hearing by Senator Kennedy last week, do you think we can trust the Chinese? And he said yes. And I think that naivete really should preclude him from being in the decision-making, because that's a real problem. And so no one's really saying that, oh, the Chinese purposely did this. We're saying that they wouldn't tell us if they had, but we're also saying that the gain-of-function research that the NIH was funding, that Dr. Fauci supported, that's a mistake, particularly in a communist country where, you know, the idea of free exchange of ideas and that accidents will be reported. It's not uncommon for accidents to happen in these labs. But what's very worrisome to us is that Fauci has still to sort of repent for his support. He was a big supporter of this gain-of-function research where you take an animal virus, you force it to evolve or mutate until it can affect humans. I think that's very, very dangerous. We shouldn't be taking a virus that has a 15% mortality and trying to make it more infectious to humans. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. But even in 2012, when Dr. Fauci was asked about this, he says, well, yes, if a scientist in the lab gets one of these viruses, it could cause a pandemic, but the research is worth it. That, to me, shows such profound lack of insight or judgment that he really shouldn't be in government. And so it isn't about him as a person, or, you know, it's really about his judgment or lack of judgment. That we really need better people in government than that.
Senator, you recently expressed concern that China is still using U.S. funding essentially to conduct these experiments over there. What should be the strategy of the Biden administration to ensure that not only does this not happen again, but that China is held accountable?
Well, we should put an immediate stop to any flow of money going to China or to the Wuhan lab. I introduced an amendment last week that did pass, and this amendment says that no more will be forthcoming. But there's a question of whether or not there's still some flowing. You know, during the President Trump's administration, they did cut it off, and then they apparently came back and have restarted that. This is a lot of money. You know, Fauci says, oh, it's only 600 grand. Well, or maybe it's 3.7 million, but the group that was funneling this received over $100 million over the last several years. So this guy, Peter Daszak, is the head of EcoHealth Alliance. He's the one subcontracting with the Wuhan lab. But then somehow he's in charge of the investigation. He flies to China. The Chinese say, nothing to see here. And he organizes this letter behind the scenes. He's saying, now, we don't want everybody to sign it because we want it to look like an independent letter in support of our research. So there's a lot going on here that's devious. There's a lot going on here that's self-interested. And you can't have the people that were giving the money to China investigate whether or not there was a leak at the lab. They have a self-interest in there not being any evidence found because the culpability boomerangs back to them.
You know, Senator, you're so right about these conflicts of interest abounding. I believe, let's turn toward the home front now regarding how we handle the virus. I think there might be some conflicts of interest as it pertains to the vaccine. And what I mean by that is that Big Pharma has it in its interest to make sure that absolutely everyone takes this vaccine. But you just tweeted out a study from the Cleveland Clinic that shows, and it's an exhaustive, large-scale, scientific, rigorous study, shows that people who have already been infected, that they do indeed have a level of immunity, which is in fact better than getting the vaccine. So do you believe that we, and I ask you this as a senator and you are a physician, do you believe that we are effectively wasting vaccine on people like you who have already been infected with the virus?
Yes, and I think it's costing lives. So, for example, in India, more people want the vaccine than can get the vaccine. But India is following Dr. Fauci's advice. His advice is vaccinate everybody. Don't think, don't worry your pretty little head about this. Don't think about it. Just do as you're told. That's his advice. One size fits all, no thinking. But, you know, if your 12-year-old had COVID 3 months ago and had barely any symptoms, got better, and then they're telling you to take a vaccine that does have some side effects, and they're warning you, now these are the signs of myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart that you could get from the vaccine. It's rare, but you say, well, my kid had the disease 3 months ago, and now you're telling me that the complications are rare. Why should I be taking it if my son or daughter is immune? So we should be able to think about this. These should be individual decisions. But I fear people like Dr. Fauci, the elitist, who then say, well, we won't let your kid in the school. And it's like, well, show me the science that says my kid is a danger to people. Even in the old days, even when it was smallpox, even when they said, oh, you used to have a passport to travel, saying you'd been vaccinated against smallpox. But you know what the exception was? If you had pox on your skin, they still let you travel, whether you had the vaccine or not, because they used to believe in immunity. And I think it's going to turn out, the studies so far show very good immunity from the natural and from the vaccine, but there may be even a slight advantage to the natural. Now, I'm not arguing to go out and get it. All I'm saying is if you were unfortunate, you got it, and you were fortunate to survive, there are advantages. There's 100 million people in the U.S. who got this and survived. We should acknowledge that. We should acknowledge their immunity. We should not beat them about the head and put them in jail if they refuse to get a vaccine, or not let them travel on planes, not let them go to school. That is not what you do in a free country.
And Senator, quickly, speaking of vaccines, there's now a sort of a renewed push by Dr. Fauci for people to get vaccines with these new variants that are supposedly a threat. They're saying this new Delta variant is going to be a concern heading into the fall. What are your concerns as we look at this, and specifically as we consider potential, additional lockdowns going forward? We've seen, obviously, that the lockdowns haven't worked.
I think some people are afraid that the danger might not wane, so they're looking for new dangers. There are variants, but it's really mostly good news. If you've had the disease naturally, or if you've been vaccinated, almost all of the variants seem to be responsive to it. And they frighten people to death, but most of the people who got COVID had an asymptomatic variety. If you were to get it again and say, oh my goodness, you could get infected again, do you think you're going to get a worse case the second time? You already have some immunity from the first time. So most likely you won't get it, but if you do get it, most of the people are getting a mild variety. It's the same with the vaccine. The vaccine's not perfect, and if you're one of the 5% of people or 2% of people that have been vaccinated that get it, most people are getting a mild variety because they have some immunity. It's not an all or none thing. So the vaccine works. Natural immunity works. In fact, the vaccines are based on the science of natural immunity. But I just don't get it where we have these scientists that are completely denying natural immunity exists and stick your head in the sand, everybody should be treated the same, everybody gets vaccinated. And I think because of that, a lot of people are discounting the advice of Dr. Fauci because he doesn't appear to be forthright or honest.
Senator Rand Paul, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you.